Hello, my divine souls. Welcome to Spiritual Bloom, where we bloom within our consciousness, with your spiritual guide and twin flame coach, Neha. In today's episode, we will be covering a very interesting topic which many people don't like to discuss. Yes, today we will be talking about narcissism and how it affects the twin flame journey. How does a narcissist behave in a twin flame journey? So, let's begin. What if I tell you that the person you believe is your twin flame is actually triggering your deepest wounds instead of your highest growth? What if the obsession, the emotional chaos, the push and pull dynamic, and the unbearable attachment isn't spiritual destiny at all? Narcissistic personalities and their impact in the twin flame relationship has a very important role, because many people stay trapped in painful relationships believing that the suffering is a part of this journey, and sometimes that belief can become dangerous. So firstly, let's understand what is a narcissistic personality. It has become very common that people have started using it even for minor, inconvenient, toxic relationships. Before we connect narcissism to twin flame, we need clarity on what narcissistic behavior actually is. A narcissistic personality exists on a spectrum. Not everyone with narcissistic traits has narcissistic personality disorder or NPD. But these patterns often include extreme self-centeredness, lack of empathy, emotional manipulation, validation seeking, control tactics, idealization and devaluation, and an unstable sense of identity hidden beneath superiority. At the core of narcissism is usually deep insecurity. Many narcissistic individuals create a false self, a carefully constructed image that hides shame, fear, abandonment wounds, or emotional emptiness. And because they depend heavily on external validation, relationships become less about connection and more about emotional supply. So, what they do is they will love bomb you, future fake, gaslight you, which is a very common thing in a narcissistic relationship, withdraw affection or give you affection as per their convenience, or create emotional confusion to maintain control. And this is where the conversation begins to overlap with many twin flame experiences online. So as we all know that the twin flame concept describes two souls that mirror one another, triggering healing, awakening and transformation. People often describe this connection as magnetic, obsessive, sometimes it's toxic, telepathic, sometimes it's emotionally overwhelming, and transformative, and sometimes you feel like it is impossible to let go of this connection. The connection can feel spiritually significant because it activates unresolved emotional wounds. And here's the important psychological truth. Intense emotional activation is not always evidence of soul destiny. Sometimes it's evidence of attachment traumas also. So don't think that just because you are emotionally connected to someone intensely, it is a soul destiny. It can be a part of your attachment trauma also. So when someone triggers your abandonment wounds, rejection fears, childhood emotional neglect, or unmet emotional needs, the nervous system can interpret that intensity as profound love. So this creates a confusion between emotional dysregulation and spiritual connection. That is where people they get confused and do not understand that whether this relationship is a healthy spiritual relationship fated relationship or a toxic narcissist relationship. Now we'll understand the narcissist and empath dynamic, which is very common in this connection, where one person is the narcissist and the other person is an empath. So many people who identify as being in a twin flame relationship describe themselves as empaths. So let's understand what empaths are. They are emotionally sensitive, deeply intuitive, compassionate, forgiving, and highly emotionally invested. These qualities are actually beautiful, but they can also make someone vulnerable to narcissistic dynamics. Now, why will that happen? That will happen because narcissistic personalities often seek people who overgive, over-explain, tolerate emotional inconsistency, and believe love can heal wounded behavior. So this creates the classic cycle. Now there are different kinds of cycle and phases. This creates the cycle of idealization phase, where the narcissistic person mirrors your dreams, your values, and your desires. You feel seen for the first time. It feels magical and it feels like destiny. It feels like you have found your forever person. And this is what the idealization phase is all about. Secondly, the devaluation phase. In this phase, suddenly the communication changes. Affection becomes inconsistent. Confusion begins. Criticism increases and emotional withdrawal appears. The empath tries really hard to gain control of the relationship and to make the other person, who is the narcissist, understand that this relationship is a love relationship. And in that process, the narcissist gains more control. Thirdly, the discard and return cycle. In this cycle, the narcissist may leave and then come back again. And that will keep on repeating. They'll leave and they'll come back again and again. And each reunion feels spiritually significant because the emotional pain creates a biochemical addiction cycle involving dopamine, cortisol, and trauma bonding. This is one of the reasons many people interpret narcissistic cycles as runner-chaser or twin flame dynamic, which is absolutely wrong. Every runner-chaser dynamic is not a twin flame dynamic. Sometimes it is also a toxic narcissistic cycle where you are trapped in. So it is your duty and responsibility to figure out and to recognize that whether your counterpart is really your twin or you're entertaining a karmic narcissistic person. Now let's understand in this whole process what is trauma bonding and how it is related to spiritual connection. Trauma bonding versus spiritual connection. This is one of the most important parts of the video. Let us understand what trauma bond is. A trauma bond is formed through intermittent reinforcement, meaning someone gives you love, then pain, then love again, and that keeps on repeating. One side love, then again pain, then again love, and again pain, and the cycle continues. So your nervous system becomes addicted to unpredictability. You start craving emotional validation from the very person causing the suffering and pain. And because the highs feel euphoric after emotional lows, the connection appears incredibly powerful. But intensity is not the same as intimacy. Remember that. Intensity is not the same as intimacy. Chaos is not the same as love. And suffering is not proof of spiritual depth. Just because you are suffering, that does not mean you are in a spiritual journey. A healthy spiritual connection should ultimately lead you towards clarity, accountability, emotional safety, mutual growth, honesty, and respect. And if it is a narcissistic relationship, then you will not get any of these clarity, accountability, or emotional safety. Instead, you will be suffering from chronic anxiety, emotional exhaustion, and sometimes loss of identity. If a relationship consistently destroys your peace, self worth, mental health, emotional stability, it's important to question whether the label twin flame is keeping you trapped. That's why I always tell you, you have to be aware, you have to gain more knowledge, you have to gain more research to understand that whether you are really in a twin flame journey or your counterpart is really your divine counterpart. Until and unless you don't get clarity about this, you can never be sure that you are in this journey or the other person is your actual divine counterpart. So let's understand that why people stay in these connections irrespective of the pain and suffering they go through. People don't stay because they are weak. They stay because the connection feels meaningful. Many people in these relationships believe we are meant to heal each other. This separation is a part of the spiritual journey. So when they love bomb them and they disappear, they think that this separation is a part of the twin flame journey. Then they love me but are afraid. Again, another misconception. They think that the other person has ghosted them because the other person has their own wounds and are hiding and are afraid to confront. That's why they are not being able to love me properly. Fourthly, I need to wait for their awakening. This is the worst part in a twin flame journey, where you are waiting for the other person to awaken instead of awakening yourself. That also not knowing whether the other person is really your counterpart. The waiting game is never ending. It will never end. But if you do proper work on yourself, if you really understand yourself and concentrate on your awakening rather than on the other person's awakening, you will never be on the waiting energy. That's why I always say that never be in a waiting energy. Take yourself out of such waiting energy, because the waiting game is a very painful process. You have to stop waiting for the other person, especially in situations like this where it is extremely codependent, toxic and narcissist. You cannot really guarantee that the other person is really your divine counterpart. So sometimes these beliefs become a way to rationalize emotional mistreatment, and social media has intensified this issue nowadays. Online spiritual communities, I have observed, they often romanticize things like emotional unavailability, inconsistency, obsessive attachment, and emotional suffering. The more painful the relation becomes, the more spiritual people assume it to be. That is what the trend is going on online nowadays. They think that because they are in a painful relationship, so that relationship is spiritual, which is absolutely wrong. But true healing doesn't require abandoning your boundaries. If you are really in such kind of spiritual journey, you will always respect your boundaries and never let any person to abuse you mentally. And real love does not demand self-destruction. Because when you enter such divine journey, you will never harm yourself. The real love comes from loving yourself. And when you love yourself, you will never allow the other person to destroy your mental peace. Now let me tell you some of the signs where you can understand that you are actually dealing with a narcissism and not a twin flame. Firstly, you constantly feel emotionally unstable. You feel like you are walking on eggshells. You spend more time anxious than peaceful. You don't feel peaceful at all, because you don't know whether the other person is going to give you the kind of relationship or the love that you deserve. Secondly, accountability never happens. Everything becomes your fault. The other person will never take accountability for their mistakes. They will always keep on blaming you for things. But in a divine journey, even if the other person is on separation, the blame game is not there at all. Thirdly, they weaponize spirituality. They use phrases like, "You are too attached," "You're blocking the connection," or they'll say that you need healing, while avoiding responsibility for harmful behavior. They will never say or admit that I am responsible for treating you this way. I should make changes. They will never accept their mistakes. Fourthly, the relationship isolates you. It absolutely isolates you. Now, isolation, I don't mean you going into hermit mode. It means you lose confidence, friendships, identity, or even emotional independence. Fifth, communication is manipulative. The other person manipulates you through their communication skills. That is, hot and cold behavior keeps you emotionally hooked. One day they'll love bomb you, the other day they'll gaslight you, and the third day they'll disappear. That is how they manipulate through communication. And sixth, you are addicted to potential, meaning you love who they could become more than who they consistently are, which means you are not accepting the reality. You are not accepting that the other person's nature is such and such. But you are in your own fantasy world, thinking that this person can improve through healing, or this person can become this way if I help him or if I guide him. That is what the problem is, no? You take the responsibility of the other person, whereas you should be taking the responsibility of your own healing rather than helping the other person. That's why I always tell you, first wear your oxygen mask before helping others, because if you won't be able to breathe, you will not be able to help the other person. So when you're addicted to such potentials that in your own la la land, you will be dreaming that the other person will improve someday, but at the end of the day you come to know that he's not your counterpart but a narcissist, you are in loss and not the other person. That person will keep on manipulating you till the time you give them chances. Seventh, your intuition feels drowned by confusion. You have intuitions, but you will be confused. Deep spiritual connections usually bring insight eventually. The more you heal, the more your intuition powers will become powerful. But manipulation creates a chronic mental fog. When the other person keeps on manipulating you, it does not allow your intuitive powers to come to the surface and help you. So your mind will always be in a fogged up position. It will never be in a state of mind to follow your intuitions. So everybody asks me, that can my divine counterpart, they think that it is their divine counterpart, but unfortunately many times it turns out to be a karmic toxic relationship. They ask that can a narcissist change? Actually, this is a very difficult question to answer. According to me, change is possible for any human being who is willing to develop self-awareness or take some therapy or accept accountability and make changes and consistently commit to change over time. But real transformation is rare without genuine effort. Words are not transformation, actions are transformation. Temporary affection is not transformation. Consistently being in a relationship or consistently giving that love is transformation. Spiritual language is not transformation. Working on healing is transformation. And behavioral inconsistency is transformation. When a person is not consistent, that is not transformation. And no one should remain in emotional harm waiting for the other person to evolve. When you wait for the other person to evolve, that is the biggest mistake you are doing, because you are not just wasting your energy, you are wasting your time. And time is precious in this journey. The more quicker you heal, the more quicker you ascend, the more things will get better for you and also for your counterpart. But when you waste time waiting for the other person to evolve, neither you are evolving, neither you are allowing the other person to evolve, and you are wasting time. because you are leading the journey. So when you lead the journey, you cannot waste time, because everything is depending on you. When you lead, when you heal, the other person also heals. Things falls into place for you in your life in this 3D. Similarly, it will fall into place for the other person also. So you cannot think about wasting time. Now let's understand the true healing for the chaser, meaning the person who is chasing, who is the actual twin. So as we know, there is a runner-chaser dynamic. So healing happens for the chaser when you stop trying to earn love through suffering. You cannot earn somebody's love through suffering. Just because you are suffering, if you're thinking that the other person will change and come and love you, you are absolutely wrong. The real journey may not be about union with another person. It may be about reunion with yourself first. That's why I always tell you, before dreaming about union with the other person, you have to reunite with yourself. Until and unless you don't sit with yourself, understand yourself, heal yourself, you can never think about, don't even dream about being in union with the other person physically or in the 5D. Now, being in reunion with yourself means what? It means rebuilding your self-worth. You lack self-worth, that's why you are chasing. That's why you are chasing who is not even your counterpart but a narcissist. You have to reconnect with reality. You have to understand the reality and what are your boundaries. Also learning healthy attachment. Is this attachment codependent or healthy? You have to understand. And see, regulating your nervous system. I have been always telling you, if your nervous system is not functioning properly, you can never heal, because it's in a constant rush. And when the nervous system is in a constant rush, it cannot decide, it cannot make boundaries, it also gets confused to decide about its own self-worth and self-esteem. And also separating intuition from emotional addiction. Sometimes you get so emotionally addicted to that person that you start ignoring your intuitions. That's why I say, right, when they manipulate you, they block your intuition. So instead of following your intuition, you get manipulated by their tricks and tactics, and you are carried away by that emotional addiction. So sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is walk away what destroys your peace, especially if it is a narcissist, toxic, karmic person. The twin flame concept can inspire growth, healing, and self-reflection. But let me tell you, spirituality should never become an excuse for emotional abuse. Even if it's your divine counterpart and if they are emotionally abusing you, you have to leave that person and let them be. Because it's not your job, it's not your duty, it's not your responsibility to heal the other person. That is the universe work. That is not your work. You wear your oxygen mask, they will wear their own oxygen mask. You don't have to help them. A relationship that constantly breaks you apart is not automatically sacred because it feels intense. The meaning of real love is what? The real love, it expands your humanity. It does not erase it. It does not make you question your identity. So, you are not alone in this journey. But there are certain steps which you should be aware and careful so that you don't get trapped in a relationship or in a dynamic with a person who is not even your counterpart. And if he or she is your counterpart, and if they are abusing you emotionally, if they are not treating you with respect, then it's better to leave that counterpart in their place and you move on with your own healing, with your own growth and ascension. They will follow when the time comes, when the divine timing comes. Your job is not to worry about them. Your job is to worry about yourself. So, I hope you like this episode on narcissism and its impact on a twin flame journey. If you really like this episode, like, share and subscribe. For any kind of personal guidance, you can WhatsApp or email me. My contact details have been given in the description box and mentioned in the videos as well. I provide counseling and guidance sessions. Before that, I give a demo of 10 to 15 minutes If you like the demo, you can book your sessions. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening to me. I really appreciate and I'm grateful for all the like, share, subscribe and support that you are giving me. Thank you so much, my soul family. I'll see you again in another episode.